In this video, I'm going to be talking about the process of ego. I'll be providing lots of different examples on how ego shows up through our experiences in the mind, in the body, in the heart, so that we can quickly identify egoic tendencies, so that we can let them go and allow ourselves to be more rested in awareness to assist with our awakening process. Ego is very difficult to define, and everyone will define it slightly differently. In this talk, I'm going to be explaining different egoic tendencies, the ways that consciousness is operating that enables us to feel like we are a separate person, to feel like somebody exists inside of here, like there's something solid and separate inside here, the me. And so there's different processes that occur, which we could just collectively say that they're ego and they're what we're wanting to put down and let go of through the awakening path, so that we can be free of egoic consciousness, be free of separation consciousness, and free to live as our true nature, which is just underneath it, those tendencies. So we let go of the tendencies and then we can live from what's already there. We could call it pure awareness, whatever you want to call it. So in this talk, I'll walk you through the different ways that ego shows up, but it's basically different egoic tendencies, different processes or ways that consciousness is operating, which happens automatically and allows us to believe that there's a separate person inside of here. And so bit by bit, we want to start to put down these egoic tendencies. And I'll talk about that as we go through it. So to start with, I'd say one of the biggest parts of ego is resistance. And so this can be really important to understand, because once we understand that when we're fighting against something, when we're resisting what is, when we have conflict against what is happening in our life, or that we're going through an awakening, or the truth of reality, or a relationship in our life, when we have some kind of friction, even if it's very subtle, all the way to to confrontation and aggression, that resistance, that pushing against, that is ego. And so this can be very helpful to understand that I'm in ego right now. I'm resisting what is going on in my life. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to deal with this family event. It's too hard. Life is too hard. I'm not enjoying it. I don't want to accept what I have to deal with in life. Awakening is too hard. I don't accept that I have to keep going through this awakening, and it's rattling my life, changing things. I'm pushing against that. I'm pushing against seeing the truths of reality, the scary ones, the confronting ones, the ones I don't want to see, truths about myself, truths about things that I, might need to let go of. I'm pushing against all of that. So that is resistance. And it can be anywhere from very obvious outward energy where we're fighting, to just an inside pushing away, an inside friction, an inside disharmony. So it can be subtle, and we're wanting to look at all the different ways that we are fighting against what is. Fighting against what is to fight against what is happening in life, and that includes awakening. That's what is. It's happening. Awakening is happening. Are we going to fight against it, which means we go into ego and we suffer? Or can we find a way to embrace it, surrender to it? And then we're not in ego, and then everything is a lot more easeful. So this is a very big part of it, is fighting, resisting. And then we quite often do this about awakening. I don't want my life to change. I didn't want awakening. We're fighting, we're staying in ego. So that's a very big part of ego. On the flip side to that is that we hang on. So it's like the flip side to the coin of pushing away is that we grasp. So on this side, we could say there is grasping, attachment, identification, clingy energy, sticky energy, holding on, addiction, wanting, craving, desire. All of these things we could sort of put on this side of the coin. And so this too is ego. So ego is both. Ego is pushing away that feeling of no, I don't want to, no, I refuse. And also, I don't want to let this go. I'm going to hold on to this, even though I've been shown this isn't good for me, this behavior, this identity, this belief that I have. I want to believe that the world is a dangerous place. I don't want to let go of that. So that grasping, that holding on to the belief is what we could call ego, that we're trying to break free of. And so it's a process on this side of things is like, how much can we trust and be willing to let go of things that need to be let go of? And there is a lot. And it's not just about things that are in your life, objects, relationships, although that could play a part of it for sure. It's often more about the identities, who we think we are. Can we let go of them? Can we let go of this image that we're portraying in the world? Can we let go of that? Can we allow people to see who we truly are? Can we allow authenticity to shine through? And so this side of things is about surrender, really. It's about how quickly can we learn how to be in a position of surrender, and so we can allow awakening to work its magic and sort out and let go of what needs to be let go of, which is going to be largely about thoughts, attachment to thoughts, attachment to beliefs, attachment to concepts. This is where that sticky energy holds on. So sticky is a good word for this side of things, where friction might be a good word for friction or disharmony, for the resistance, if we feel that energetically. And on this side of things, it's this grasping feeling. You might feel it in your gut. And so it can be helpful to tune into the body. Where do I feel that holding on? Is it in my chest? Is it in my gut? This feeling of stickiness, this attachment to thought, the inability for, so it's like when we're doing a meditation and we are noticing the thoughts moving past and they're sliding past, you could say you're not in ego there. You're not grasping at anything. You're not identifying with any of them. They're just moving past. So while you're in that state, you're not resisting, you're not grasping. So you could say you're not in ego. You're in an egoless state then. When you're attached to a thought, you could say that's when ego is being activated, grasping, attachment. Or we could be fighting the mind. No, I don't want to have that thought. Resistance. We're in ego. And so we see we've just got to stop picking up or fighting against the thought process. We just got to find a way, the middle way, to let them slide past. And this is the practice that we do as a part of our meditation. So that's one side of it. And I'd say this craving, addiction, this wanting the next thing will be on the side of this grasping of ego. We have this insatiable hunger within us to want more as we're trying to fill the feeling of separation. We feel like there's a sense of lack, that something's missing. We don't feel whole. And so we might not even register that, but we feel it intuitively and we try to fill it up with outside experiences, with outside things, with a new house, with a new holiday, with new objects, with new relationships. And then we transfer that to awakening. So to new awakening experiences, we try to get deeper and different experiences. But that's all a part of ego, the wanting part. So that's another thing to look out for. And when we start to see that that wanting energy, that craving energy is getting dialed down, then we start to see that we're making progress with awakening. And there's a part of us that wants to feel special and wants to know the answers and wants to feel important. And this can come from the wounded part of us, which I do include as a part of ego. I could call it wounded ego, which I'll get into next. But there's this sense of self-importance or specialness or uniqueness, or that I know the answer, that often comes from a wounded place. But this feeds in, becomes an egoic tendency. So this wanting to say that I know, wanting to say I have all the answers, wanting to say I'm a specialist, whether this is happening at work, which is where it's largely going to happen, but it could be, making a YouTube video and talking about how much you know. It could be writing a comment on a Facebook post to explain, I know the answers, I know things. So it's trying to get validation, trying to get recognition, trying to feel important, trying to feel superior, all of this feeling of I'm better than, or I know the answer. I know the answer and you don't. I know more than you. It creates like a false hierarchy where we believe we're better than someone or we're above someone. And whenever we're feeling like we're superior or inferior to anybody else, we're in ego. And when we're just feeling equal, then you could say we're not on this point. So it's helpful to understand that ego is, I believe I'm better than and I know more than this person, or also I'm inferior to this person. I'll never be as good as them. I'll never be as good as my work colleagues. I'll never be as smart as this person. That is also ego. It's on the flip side. So that's more in our blind spot. So whether we feel above or below is both egoic tendencies and both what we're wanting to break free of to keep progressing with awakening. So this really shows up in work where we think we know the answers, but then this really turns to awakening, and it's very common to want to know more and more and more about awakening and reality, and then to also want to talk about it, to want to express, this is how much I know about awakening. So just notice that tendency, that pull inside you to want to tell people about it, to want to say how much you know about it, to want to write comments about it, or blog posts about it, or make videos about it. But that tendency to say, I know, I have the answers, which typically coming from a wounded place, but it is an egoic tendency. So we're trying to turn down by not doing that, not following that impulse of, I know, just trying to resist it and just sit in that uncomfortable energy. And that starts to dissolve that egoic tendency of wanting to say how much I know about whatever it is. And so this superiority, inferiority part of ego is largely driven by this wounded part to ourselves, this wounded ego, we could call it. We could call it the pain body, or just our unmet emotional parts that we need to work on, those patterns that are within us that are unhealed. Whatever we want to call that, we could include this in ego because it feeds the illusion of a separate self, which is what all of these tendencies do. So if we start back at the beginning, the fighting against, the resistance makes us feel like we're in here. We're the ones that are fighting as a separate self in here. When we hold on, it gives us an energetic sense of grasping, that we feel more solid. I'm here. I exist in here. I can almost feel it. It feels solid. It feels dense because I've got attachments. There's things that I hold on to, I exist because I have family members. I have all these things. I have all these cats. I have all these, whatever it is, these attachments make me feel like I exist here. And I'm important. I know a lot of things. I must exist as a separate person that knows all of this, that's unique, that's special, that's important. And see how it all does the same thing. It feeds into the illusion that there's a separate self here. And so does the pain body. And so it's certainly coming from a wounded place, and it requires more than just letting go of egoic tendencies. It requires healing, inner child work, perhaps therapy, to really get to the core of all of that wounding. But at the end of the day, we could call it ego because it's feeding the illusion of a separate self. And that is because these things are unresolved in the system, and they're activating and being triggered by what's happening in the day and by your own mind. And so that keeps reinstating that there's a separate self here, even though there's not. It's what it makes it feel like. And so it's going to make it very difficult to make progress while you have a lot of wounding there, which is why I always recommend to go and get help with that as soon as possible. And that wounded self, the pain body, really has a voice of its own if we're trying to identify ego in this wounded way. And it's going to be, I'm less than, I'm worthless, I'm useless, nobody loves me, I'm unlovable. It could be doubt, could be fear, it could be projection of parental wounds onto other people in the workplace, projection. It could be being defensive, shows up that way, taking things too personally, taking things too seriously, attention seeking. All kinds of these wounded behaviors can be an indication that there's not only something to be healed, some healing work to do, but then we could also say, I'm also in ego here. This is activating the illusion that there's a separate self here. And so I really want to try and work on letting this go as soon as possible. And so we try to maintain this image and then bring this out into the world, and we do this very unconsciously. And this forms part of what the illusory identity is that we're trying to break free of on the awakening path. And we could call this a part of ego, is this creation of and then holding and projecting it into the world, this image of ourselves. And so this could be anything. It's just what our conditioning has established as what's important for us and the identities that we have running. So it could be wanting to look smart, intelligent. And so we will dress in a certain way, and we'll present ourselves in a certain way and speak in a certain way. We may speak softly, articulately. We might crack jokes and be funny. We might be very overly loving and touchy-feely. There's all these things that we'll do to try and show the world that we are this separate self with these layers of identity. So we do this unconsciously, of course. And so, but when we're doing this, when we're trying to be a certain way, create a certain image, and then portray that out into the world, I'm a kind person, I'm loving, I'm funny, I'm smart, whatever it is, then you could say we're an ego. We're an ego when we're doing that. So that's something to look out for as we go out into the world. Are we trying to maintain an image there, or are we being authentic when we go out? And ego is largely going to be showing up in thinking. And so a lot of the thought processes are going to be egoically formed, we could say. So all the wounded thoughts that I suggested before, so that's kind of easy to understand. And then all the more superior thoughts, all the ones where I know the answer to that, I know that, or I can do better than that. Anytime we're feeling like inflated, puffy, right, or deflated, So energetically, inflation, deflation is a way to notice ego, but notice what the mind is saying. What is the mind saying automatically that is egoic in nature? Because it's creating hierarchy, it's coming from a wounded place, it thinks it's better than. Is it trying to control? This can be a large part of ego, controlling behavior, controlling myself, controlling others. Or on the flip side, do I want to be controlled? Do I want people to sort my life out for me? Do I not want to take responsibility? Again, wounded ego. So it's just helpful to know both sides, how they play out over and over again to try and identify what it is for you specifically, how it is showing up. But in the mind, there's just going to be so many of the thoughts. So just you could even start to journal them down, which ones you think might be superior thoughts and which ones might be inferior thoughts. In the heart, in the emotional body, we could think of the egoic thought processes that have happened have allowed for a manifestation in the heart center and the emotional center of resistance, of walls of resistance in the heart, of protection. It's manifested that way. So the resistance of ego has manifested in the heart of don't get too close to me. I'm going to close my heart down. Well, that's too painful, or I'm not willing to open myself up for love. So it's still the same kind of energy of resistance, of blocking, and of contraction that we see throughout, all of talking about ego. But we're seeing it happen through the emotional system and through the heart, this closing down and walls that are created as a manifestation of egoic consciousness in the emotional body. We see it in the physical body through contraction. We see it as tension and stress, this feeling of going in like this. This is how it manifests in the physical body. I'd say tension, contraction, those types of words are really key to notice. And this is also happening on an energetic level in the energy body, if you're good at tuning into the energy body. So you can notice physically, emotionally, energetically, we're contracting. No, protection, protection. And this feeling we could think of that's ego showing up in the body. And what it does is this contraction makes it feel like we exist in here as a separate person. It really adds to that, another layer to that illusion, because it feels like we're in here. The contraction makes us feel localized here, right? So think of how many times you've had thought processes where you felt inadequate, where you felt less than, where you felt wounded, where you felt like you weren't special. And in that you contracted and you felt separate, you felt alone, you felt abandoned, and you contracted and you contracted and you contracted. Right? So this is why I talk about working through body contractions and how these manifestations of wounds and things that have happened to us are lodged in the body and the nervous system. And so we could say that that's ego in the body, those contractions. And so we're wanting to focus our attention on them and to allow them to let go, break free. And so ego is a lot, if you understand ego as being about a contraction largely, about a real feeling of friction and contraction, tight, like a ball of energy here, right? And so we're wanting to do the opposite to try and let go of that. So on the level of the body, we're wanting to try and relax all of the body. And if we need support through some type of modality that helps us to do that, or just bringing attention to contractions in the body, we want to let go incrementally and allow that. And same in the heart, we're wanting those barriers to let go and the heart to open. We're wanting the mind to stop hanging on and grasping and sticking to thoughts and attaching, and to just be free and be open. To see how this open energy, open indefinitely, really counteracts the contraction energy of ego that makes us feel separate. All of a sudden we feel one, we feel whole. And so understanding energetically what we're trying to do here in all the different centers can help to counteract egoic tendencies. So now I'll give you some examples in the day just to help you to start to think about how it might be showing up for you. It's probably best to use this teaching and stop at each step and just contemplate and journal how it's looking for you. So this is a general overview of how ego can show up. But I'm sure there's many other ways that I have forgotten. But just so you've got a general understanding. But then it's really more important that you figure out how it's showing up for you. And so then you can start to let go of those egoic tendencies. We don't just want to have awareness, although that's a very good start. We're wanting to put down these behaviors, these tendencies, these processes that ego does, consciousness does automatically. So when we go out in public, anytime we're dealing with other people, there's a good chance that ego is going to be activated. And so be on alert for that. Pay attention, see what the mind is saying, notice what the contractions are happening in the body. When you're talking to people, are you leaning back? Are you saying, I don't really want to be here? Are you resisting being in that conversation? That would be resisting what is, that's ego. Or are you completely present and listening? Or are you saying forward-moving energy, I know more than you, or I know about this topic you're talking about. I know. I'm going to tell you about it. I'm going to jump in as soon as I can and tell you everything I know. So that would be ego on more of a forward-moving energy. So we can energetically see, am I contracting back or am I too forward moving? Both would be egoic. Or am I just resting? Am I just resting and open and listening? And so that's a good way to navigate ego as you go about your day and you deal with others. But it can happen through driving. Road rage would be an extreme example, but just how we have thoughts as we're coming across people, the thoughts that we have about them and what they're doing. So just noticing judgment and comparison, noticing how we're thinking we're better than someone or that they're doing something wrong, creating these internal dialogues that are comparing and creating hierarchy. We're in ego. So start to notice where you're doing that or where you're putting yourself below, same thing. So anytime we go out is a good opportunity to start to identify ego. We're trying to maintain that image that I spoke about before, that we're trying to hold and portray. And so start to notice where we're doing that and what that image is made up of, what identities that's made up of. And we're getting triggered. We're going to be triggered when we go out there, when we're talking to people. And this is going to be activating the pain body, the wounded ego, and showing us what's left to heal. So anytime we're getting irritated or offended, it's a good opportunity to look at, what wounded part here wants to be healed. In our sort of primary relationship, our romantic relationship, it's largely about the wounded ego being activated. And so it's more along the lines of that healing, and it could be along the lines of therapy, the attachment wound, the baby wound, and things like that. But that's where ego is going to be mostly showing up. In our romantic relationships is all of our wounding. And so we're wanting to work in that arena mostly. But then there's some relationships that are unhealthy, where there might be a dynamic of someone superior and inferior and that type of thing. And then, of course, that's going to feed egoic tendencies because of that false hierarchy. And so that's something to look out for, that you would want to change or maybe remove yourself from the relationship or whatever it is you want to do. Because if there's some type of hierarchy there, that's going to be feeding egoic tendencies. with your family, with children. It can be a little bit challenging because we're wanting to take on a role as a parent where we are, of course, teaching our children. And so there's a healthy component to that. And we just have to be careful of when it's sort of sliding into a more egoic side of things, that it's getting a bit murky. And that could be that we're giving too much advice or trying to control our child, saying that we know everything, just trying to take over too much, trying to be the authority figure. And so we have to really try to navigate, which is healthy parenting and giving advice and teaching that's required. And where is it going into now? I'm going more into my egoic side of things where I'm feeling superior talking about this subject. So just trying to navigate that through parenting. When we're talking about money or our successes with people, this is going to be usually quite a big ego activator for most people. So I got a job promotion, not everyone, of course, but depending on our conditioning. I got a job promotion, I bought a new house, I've got new investments, I've got this new business idea, I've got really lucky on trading, whatever it is, right? That talking about our successes and money is quite activating of ego. So just notice your tendency to want to tell people about how well you're doing, and maybe just try not to. Just see if you can hold that in, and it might feel uncomfortable, but just seeing if you can rest in that uncomfortable energy of not letting egoic tendencies just have their way automatically. Because this is largely how we start to break them, is to just not feed them. And then at work, I would say this is work, or your business is where ego is probably the strongest. And so from a wounded place, if we don't feel like we're doing a very good job or that we're not getting anywhere in our career, then there's going to be the wounded ego and all of that wounded talk that's feeling insecure and doubting and worthless and all of that. So that's going to require healing, inner child work, healing of the past traumas and of the childhood, things that happened in childhood and in life, to start to let that go. And then on the flip side is going to be all of the more superior type of egoic tendencies. So we're going to want to say what we know, that we're a specialist, that we're going to want to do a talk in a meeting about how much we know about something. We're going to want to feel special because we're the best at something, or unique because we're creative. And we want to be heard. We want recognition. We want validation. So this recognition, validation, these are sort of key words to start to notice at work. Where am I doing that? Whether it's coming from a wounded place or a superior place, either way, it's ego. So where is this? I want recognition. I want respect. I want people to listen to me. Can we see where we might be doing that at work? Because then we know we're in ego. And so this going to work and having a business can be one of the best ways that we can work on breaking egoic tendencies, because a lot of it is going to come up in that arena. And just some other random pointers to add on where ego might be showing up. If we're fixated on our looks, which forms part of our image that I spoke about, but this could be how our body looks. So there's, of course, a self-care aspect. That's not what I'm talking about, taking care of yourself, that we want to do. But when we're becoming obsessive about how attractive we are, what our body looks like, that type of thing, then we're in ego, and that's some tendencies that we're wanting to try and let go of. Anytime that we're feeling very separate, if we're using words like I feel very alone, I feel isolated, I feel separate, that's an indicator that we're in ego. So ego, of course, are the tendencies that create that illusion of separation. And so anytime we're feeling really like, I feel really like I'm here, like it feels really dense, I feel really separate from the world, I don't feel like I'm a part of what's happening here, the flow of life. I feel like I'm back here, an observer of life. So when we're feeling any kind of sense of dense solidity, separate, aloneness, contraction, those types of words, when we're pulling back, when we're isolating, when we're feeling depressed, we're going inward like this in a negative way, that's an indicator that we're in some type of wounded egoic strategy. And then as a final note, when we're being quite close-minded or stubborn, when we're not wanting to change, we all know people like that, but if we're truthful with ourselves, we'll find that within ourselves to some degree. That closed-minded is like a contraction. It's not, because if we remember to break egoic tendencies, we're wanting to open up in all ways. And so if you think of closed-minded as going inward, as like a contraction again. So we're wanting to be open-minded. We're wanting to listen to what people tell us. We don't have to take everything on board, but we're not saying that we know everything automatically. As soon as we're saying that to ourselves, I don't listen to anyone else. I know everything. We're an ego. So to counteract that, we want to be open-minded. Let me hear about what people are saying about a topic. Let me see if I can break free of these constricted ways and opinions that I have. Ego is it creates very limited thinking, very closed off thinking, very strong opinions. So anytime when we're closed-minded, if we're using words like that, we're stubborn, we have a very fixed point of view, we're very opinionated, we have strong opinions, that's ego. When we're open-minded, when we're willing to listen to others, when we're wanting to explore and experience different things, that's getting out of egoic tendencies, and that's a way we can start to break free of the egoic tendencies of the mind, not holding on to them too tightly. That's the grasping aspect. Can I just allow myself to listen to this other person's point of view? So that can be another way we can start to break these egoic tendencies.